What's up, guys? It's Justin, better known maybe to you as Coach J, and I wanted to put a video together kind of highlighting my thoughts on 2020 for the team, obviously being Renegades, the team I coach, and moving forward into 2021, what the future holds for us. Some lessons learned, a little bit of summary and backstory on myself, both in Counter-Strike and in Valorant, and take it from there. I'm going to do this all kind of as a stream of consciousness, as if you will. All I have really are a couple of notes in terms of topics I want to make sure I touch on so that I stay on task. The other thing too, I just want to put this out here for anyone that's watching. I went through like probably a good 10 minutes of trying to psych myself up just to record this video. I don't think people realize when you're in the spotlight how challenging it is to get over the self-doubt and just move forward and actually take action. And I bring this up because if there's anybody out there that's struggling with tournament nerves or trying out for a team or the fear of failure, you just have to take that first step, which is what I'm doing by making this video. I literally went through and cycled through like 10 hats, putting them on because I didn't like the way my hair looked. I was defeating myself before I even got the nerve to hit the record button. So don't defeat yourself, believe in yourself, and let others help mold and shape you into a better version of yourself. I mention that because if you do like this video, I would appreciate if you liked it or commented on it or subscribed. I don't know. I don't know what the jargon is for those types of things because I don't typically put out long form content like this. Any of the videos on my channel have either they're multiple years old or they're pulled from streaming, not really ever sat down with a plan to do something like this. So to briefly summarize my history in CS, I didn't even know that Global Offensive existed, like 2015, 2016, really. I played Counter-Strike really from the moment it came out in the year 2000 up until 2004 when I went to college. I played a little bit of Source, not competitively, but just for fun while I was in college, and then I took a break. So all of my competitive experience was on the early days of Counter-Strike through like 1.6. I was never an impressive player. I don't have any real accolades to my name the way some of the other OGs do. I was just a big fan of the game and watching the CPL and guys like Sir Scoots who sort of pioneered esports broadcast. Those were my idols growing up. I never thought that I would be in a position to where I would have a platform and a voice with regards to competitive gaming, but I did always hope that I would get there. I did some projects and did some tournament management and things in StarCraft as well. The two kind of OG esports were the two places I really earned my chops in terms of gaining experience. I tell you all this to tell you that even to this day, the most money I've earned in a single setting in esports is basically just writing a one-page essay as a college scholarship essay into the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. I wrote a one-page paper on leadership, and I essentially compared my experience with in-game leading in Counter-Strike to real-world examples of where I thought there was some dichotomies or some similarities between the act of leading a young group of men versus what I potentially thought I saw happening for myself in my future, and that netted me a full ride to the University of Tennessee. So to this day, that is the most money I've ever made in esports. And so those of you that are growing up in this age of esports, it's a wonderful opportunity, but make sure that you have a plan B because it's a long road. It's been 20 years in esports for me before I got my first paycheck. So within Counter-Strike, I worked in the amateur scene a lot when I first got involved. Really decided to make a team and realized I did not have the mechanical ability anymore to play the game at a high level, and figured rather than just give up, I would try my hand at coaching and roster building. So I really did a combination of coaching and management for the better part of 3 years in Counter-Strike. I had some highs. I put a roster together. It took me 5 seasons to get out of open, just so you guys know as well too. It's the road to success is paved with disappointment, but I put a roster together eventually that made it out of open into IM. Made a couple tweaks just due to player commitments, and we ended up winning IM in season 24 of ESEA and being promoted to what was then ESEA Premier, now known as the Mountain Dew League. I think it was the last season of Premier was the season that I was in, or it may have even been Mountain Dew League. So I kind of blew my roster up, and I really messed up when we got promoted. I definitely took a step back from the coaching position because I had also been trying to build a brand at the same time, and I felt like this was my break, and this is where I needed to put all my cards in and really start to push the brand and organization piece as opposed to the coaching piece. And we didn't have a very good season. I brought in someone else to coach at the beginning, and that just caused a lot of friction between former players and current players and differing philosophies. We really didn't perform well. I think we got 6 wins, and of those, one of them was a forfeit win. And this was before MDL had relegation. We were relegated to main because advanced didn't exist, and then I petered around in main and advanced for about 4 seasons before I hung up the cleats proverbially, deleted my ESEA account, and decided I was done with Counter-Strike after I had blown probably about $20,000 of my own money, basically trying to get my organization Guerrilla Tactics up off the ground. When Valorant came around, I had been out of competitive FPS for almost 2 years. Really, the last thing I did in competitive FPS was to go to Fragadelphia 2018, where I met Bergie, who had played previously for me on Guerrilla Tactics, and I actually went with, these names might ring a bell, with Fiend and Alexander. They were playing for me on the final Guerrilla Tactics roster that I put together. So big ups to the Moon Raccoons, shout out to them. But coming back into Valorant and seeing the team that was putting it together, seeing Volcano on it, one of my big idols growing up, and I was a huge fan of Team 3D when I played CS in the early days. I was excited about the game, and I actually sat in Lex's channel when the drops were enabled on the first day, and I got a key. But I knew I wasn't going to actually play competitively, and I had remained friends with both CP2 and Winsome despite having no competitive FPS background anymore, because again, to tell the CS story a little bit more clearly, I had put a roster together that consisted of Bergie, CP2, Winsome, Kenny, who no longer plays competitive FPS, and FGB, who you guys might know as well. That was my main roster that I thought would get us back into MDL, and we came really close. We lost to a team in the ESEA main playoffs that I believe if we had beaten, and we were on a path to beating them, we would have had a run into MDL again. But Zelsis was on the team, Hunter was on the team, G-Man was on the team, who plays Valorant now, I believe. It's played for a couple teams, and I don't remember the other players on the team at this point, but I just know that we ran into this wall that was a team that, simply put, we were up against and then let that slip away from us due to some poor performance. And I bring all this back together because Chuck, Winsome, and I remained friends outside of the game beyond our end of our competitive playing. We raided together when Battle for Azeroth came out, and then when Valorant came out and I got my key, I decided, I think Winsome got a key pretty early on, that I was going to give my key to Chuck. So Riot, don't ban me or anything, but I did originally give my my first account to Chuck so that he could grind the game. Then once it became open to everybody and the keys started flowing, like water, I got my own account, or we gave our accounts back to one another. I don't even remember at that point, but that allowed him to really get an early start on playing. And I think through the beta is where he met Randy Savage, and the team sort of came together organically beyond that. So I know there's a lot of pieces that kind of tie back to Guerrilla Tactics in CS, but the team wasn't built in that way, and I didn't even come on until after the team joined Renegades, and that's a story that we'll get into kind of right now. I came on to Renegades really as an accident. The team, I think, was trialing a coach at the time, and I had seen, at this point, I hadn't even really touched Valorant in a couple months, but I had seen a lot of players that I knew had either made the swap to Valorant or that they were in the process of making the swap. And I thought, I've got relationships with folks now that were at the amateur level who have sort of had an opportunity to reset and potentially make a name for themselves in a new title. So I thought, based on my own previous experience in sales and relationship building, that this was a prime opportunity for myself as well, because I always felt that I had what it took in Counter-Strike based on my experience and my time in the scene to build a world-class team, a team that could compete at the highest level. But a big part of that is having your name out there and having the relationship. So again, if you're one of those guys that's maybe on the outside looking into the tier 2 scene, if you're on the tier 2 scene looking into the tier 1 scene, DMs of players are always open. DMs of coaches are always open. There are definitely folks that I talk to now that in my wildest dreams a couple years ago, I would not have relationships with those people. And I believe that maybe the same people or other folks could say the same thing about having relationships with me. So you will never make progress if you're not willing to fail. A theme I'm coming back to here is the fact that you have to put that first foot forward and take action. So I implore you, if you're watching this video and if you've made it this far, to just do and see what happens, because you will be no worse off than you were yesterday. That kind of leads into my philosophy as a coach. And my philosophy as a coach, I believe it's malleable, right? Like, I don't walk in with a my way or the highway approach to coaching. And I think the same could be said of if you're a player joining a new team, or if you have players coming onto your team, to be mindful of those things as well. Don't try and pigeonhole someone. Be flexible, be adaptable. I think that's a sign of a good leader, is the ability to not be stuck in a particular mindset. It's very easy to be very rigid in your beliefs. It's a lot more difficult to be flexible in your decision making and in your overarching theme or philosophy of what it is that it means to be a team. And I think that that's even more so true in a game like Valorant, where you have different agents, different compositions, different utility, different abilities, different ultimates. It makes for what I think is an extremely challenging game from a team play perspective. And we can argue about the skill ceiling of Valorant right now, and I think for the most part we're all in agreement that the individual skill ceiling of the game could use a slight bump with some changes to the way that accuracy mechanics work. And we've seen already some of the nerfs to the op to make that really impactful in some of the best hands, but not necessarily have the ability to have an impact in everyone's hands. And that again kind of ties back in to my philosophy. So though I knew everybody on the Renegades, I knew Randy slightly. Him and I had conversed a little bit and played in the beta before competitive was released. I wasn't walking in with like the keys to the castle, so to speak, in terms of being able to have the players come to me for a overarching philosophy of how we were going to approach the game. And I like to use sports analogies because I like to think of esports as traditional sports, because I think you get the most value and you bring the most out of players when you approach the game in that way. So I'm going to use the example of Tom Brady spending 20 years in Bill Belichick's system in New England and then going to Tampa Bay, right? So he's now playing under Bruce Arians as a head coach. Bruce Arians cannot take 20 years of Tom Brady and make a Bruce Arians version of Tom Brady. He has to understand that he has the Bill Belichick Tom Brady. Tom Brady is himself. So the moment that Bruce Arians tries to change or to bring about the type of philosophy that he's had for his years of coaching over Tom Brady without being able to understand the background of Tom and his legendary status as a 6-time Super Bowl winner. There will be friction, and if he's calling plays that Tom Brady doesn't believe in, then the team is doomed to fail. So I think we've seen in Tampa Bay, so I'm going to take a quick drink. We've seen in Tampa Bay a willingness for Bruce Arians and the rest of the coaching staff to essentially let Tom Brady run the offense. And I would say that that's when I've come in as a coach to a previously established roster, that's more of my general philosophy as well. So what you see from Renegades is really what the players want to do, what the players feel comfortable doing. It's not necessarily something that we've gotten together on and crafted from the ground up, but there's a big piece that goes into that, and the roles that the players feel comfortable in is also extremely important. But right now, collectively, the team has an idea about how they want to approach the game. So it's my job as coach to make sure that we're successful as possible executing that vision and what it means to run that game plan. So I say all of this because I believe in the game plan that we had going into our match versus TSM. We obviously were dark horses coming in to First Strike, especially given our results at our own namesake event, right, where we lost to some teams that I think all of us internally would agree we should not have lost to, and we had to do some soul searching regarding why that happened, and we did some role swaps, and we did some things because we felt like if we didn't make these changes, there was no way for us to be propelled forward. So with that said, we put our two younger players in a similar to a 100 Thieves setup. We put them on high-impact duelist characters. We moved some of our older players onto more support and what I like to call the closing positions, guys that are going to be alive in the post plant, guys who have been in high-pressure situations, or at least the most high-pressure situations that we've been in thus far, right? Because none of us have tier 1 competitive experience outside of maybe playing in, online qualifiers or playing a team or two at Fragadelphia, for example, where we gained some of that experience of playing versus upper-level players. But we weren't doing it day in and day out. We certainly weren't scrimming in Counter-Strike high-level opponents day in and day out like we are now in Valorant. And a big piece of being successful right now in Valorant is not falling behind. And I think in retrospect, we've probably fallen behind a little bit, and I'm going to go into that right now. And that's just because we've chosen to kind of go all in on what had worked for us going into First Strike, because we didn't have anything to lose going into the close qualifiers. We knew that we had the ability, we believed in ourselves to qualify, but we certainly knew that we were going to have to do things a little bit differently. In my opinion, the default is one of the most challenging things as a leader to implement as a philosophy on an attacking style, or an attacking side of whether it be Valorant, whether it be Counter-Strike, or any other tactical shooter. It's simple to put players in positions in a default, but the default relies on not only information that you see, but also information that you don't see. It relies on an absurdly high level of communication so that everyone is clear on what objectives are being obtained, what objectives are being contested, and what objectives are unwinnable, right? So if there's too many players to run a specific part in the default, that piece breaks, and every player really becomes their own leader in that position in terms of decision making, in terms of knowing when to advance, knowing when to fall back, knowing when to retreat. There's a lot that's happening on an individual level there where everyone has to be in tune. And if you're not in tune, what you end up with is a default that falls apart. You are picked apart by more experienced players who know how to counter what they see. They process the information more quickly. Reads are made and counters are made much more quickly than if you are an inexperienced team such as ourselves. And we saw that in practice. We saw in practice that when we attempted to play a slower style of Valorant, we were not finding the success that we wanted as a team. We might have individual performances where players really were able to open up rounds and allow us to make good mid-round plays, but we weren't playing the default as a team the way to our standard, to a Renegade standard. So we really decided that we would go all in on executes, kind of similar to a Virtus Pro style of Counter-Strike in the early 2016s, where they found success. They literally run majors by running plays that folks knew they were coming, but they were executed so well that if you were not perfect in your decision making, in your reactions, and in the post-plant situations, you would lose the round. And that is what we saw when we played Cloud9. There wasn't a lot of secrets to what was happening with Cloud9. It was simply that they could not stop us. Again, and that's not an ego thing. It's not me trying at all to disparage Cloud9, because they're a fantastic team. We just played them in practice a couple of days ago and they were freaking phenomenal. But that day, our game plan, we executed it to perfection. Our communication was on point. Our post plants were on point. Our post plant aggression was on point. We were in their spawn on a lot of post plants. We just played to basically burst onto the site, and then with the little bit of utility that we had left, or while they were setting up their post plant utility, we bullied them, and it worked. Obviously, Split was a map that I think it went to 6 overtimes. I can't remember right now off the top of my head, but we felt like we had something there that we could take with us into the actual First Strike tournament, and then throw a wrinkle in by adding Sky. Sky was the unknown. Sky, as a agent, has a high mechanical skill level, right? Because not only can your flashes be broken a la Reyna, but you have to stop moving to control them. So we put CP2, we put Chuck on Sky, and really decided to allow him to be the quarterback, if you will, of the offense, in the terms of everything was going to run through his tempo. And I thought we had some really good plays as we went into our match versus TSM. I mean, we had a warm-up scrim an hour before our match where I believe we won the first 9 rounds on Ascent, running our executes. And I thought that we had a cadence in the order in which we were going to run our executes that would solve 2 problems when you play TSM. The first one would be keep Wardell off the op for as long as possible. So our thought was, if we could win pistol, win an anti-eco, win the first gun round, because he likely would not have an op on the first gun round in round 3, win another either light buy or anti-eco there, we would pick up 4 rounds on our attacker side before Wardell had an op, before he gets warmed up, and before he gets loose, so for lack of a better term. That was sort of what our objective was in the first 4 rounds. So I say this because obviously the scoreboard did not reflect what our game plan was, and we stuck to our game plan regardless of the outcome of those first 4 rounds, because I still think it, and I think the team still believes it was our best chance to win on Thursday. I will say that I don't think the scoreboard on Ascent was reflective of the actual outcome of the game. I know it was a 13-1 scoreline, but I can count on my hands at least 4 rounds where we had win conditions and we let them slip through, either through poor execution. We had a couple of post-plant strategies where the nade missed on the post-plant, where it would have killed the diffuser. I mean, there was several rounds that came down to the diffuser basically just holding the stick in the post-plant and winning the round for them. We had another round, and on that same round, I believe, then, because the nade missed, the ultimate from our Sova came in late as well, and that in turn allowed them to defuse the bomb. the pistol round on both sides, we were in positions to win, and we didn't, especially the one on the attacker side, because that would have helped propel the game plan forward. And then our first gun round, which was basically a mid to B split, I think would have been more effective had we kept an op out of Wardell's hands for that first buy round, because he just literally shut down every player at mid, and then I think just flipped around and killed another player in B main. So a lot of things did not go our way, and that's competitive gaming. That's competitive sports in general. And then the rest played out from there, right? We are still a young and still an inexperienced team at this level. I think looking back at the map pick and map ban process, I probably could have done a little bit better job in guiding that. I think we ended up being Team B, which what Team B meant for First Strike is that you were giving up the first map ban in order to get the first map pick. I think it might have made sense to take the first map ban, because if you don't know, TSM banned Icebox, which we didn't want them to ban per se. We didn't want to play it, but we didn't want them to ban it. We were hoping that they would ban Split, because we had played them on it twice and beaten them on it twice. And if they ban Split, then we would ban Icebox, and we would play Ascent, Haven, and Bind. I think Haven was a really good map for us. In practice, we had come up with probably the most holistic approach to the map that I think countered TSM's playstyle the most, but we also psychologically in our heads, we knew what a good team TSM was on Haven, and we also know that in our past results we have not ever beaten them on that map, and so we shied away from it. I think in retrospect, Haven could have been a map for us that we could have won. I think Ascent is a map that we could have won had we gotten 5, maybe 6 rounds on our attacker side through our playbook and through keeping Wardell off the op as much as possible. Or the ultimate goal with going A early on in the half was to get Wardell playing A main, because every flash that we threw was meant to push an opper back and back and back until ultimately they had nowhere to go and we were on site. That was the goal in what we were doing, but because we never had any success anywhere else on the map, they didn't need to put Wardell there. They could let Wardell basically just play where he wanted and provide information that we weren't there. And we kind of, because we got shut down early on the mid to B, we didn't lean into it as much, and we obviously didn't get as many buy rounds as we want. There was no momentum, and similar to TSM, I think we're a huge momentum-based team. And losing your map pick 13-1 when you are the heavy underdog is demoralizing in and of itself. I don't know that we would ever have beaten TSM on Bind on Thursday. Whether we had won Ascent or not, I don't know that Bind was our map. I don't think it was our best map. It was their map pick, obviously, so they felt very comfortable and strong on it. There was a lot of internal debate within the team whether we were going to even run Sky on Bind. We hadn't really cracked the code on Bind, I think, in terms of how we wanted to use Sky yet, in terms of like overarching philosophy. And I think the performance on Bind is a bit reflective of where our mental state went when we lost our map pick 13-1. Unfortunately, too, there's not a lot of time as a coach in First Strike for you to make adjustments to help the team. 1 30-second tactical timeout is all you get. Huge delay, 3-minute delay on the stream, so you're definitely, with our play style, right? Like that could be 4 or 5 rounds behind, what the action is. And like I said, like when you kind of put your eggs in one basket in terms of Ascent being the map that we are going to take off of TSM to get us to map 3 on Split, which again, I know that they had been practicing that map and they were coming up with a plan, but I still felt like our game plan and our ability to attack on that map is a very strong point for us. We have some very nice set plays defensively as well too, where we make some reads. We have some setups that are very counter meta in terms of abilities to have multiple players peeking at multiple times, similar to if you watched the way that Vision Strikers play Bind yesterday. Absolutely phenomenal team on on Bind. The way that they force contact and have another player ready to peek as the player's taking the fight. You have to be perfect on your attacker side, Bind, at least in the Korean scene right now, in order to take down Vision Strikers on that map. So props to them as well. And I really feel like, simply put, we just were not ourselves when we played TSM. Again, taking nothing away from TSM because they were absolutely firing on all cylinders. They played a phenomenal game. But I do believe that our game plan that we brought in gave us the best chance to win. With all that being said, I'm extremely proud of our team, our organization, our players on the success that we did have in 2020. It's been a great opportunity for us to build experience, and we're going to take that experience and bring it back to the drawing board so that we can continue to improve as we head into 2021. We know what the format looks like for 2021. We know there's not a huge off season, so we need to be getting ready and we need to be building upon what we have, and that work doesn't stop. It starts now. And again, for those of you out there that are watching, I appreciate you getting through this. I had no idea how long it was going to take me to put the year in review, so to speak, but I'm thankful if you've made it this far, and I wish you all the success in the world, and I plan to see all of you again in 2021.